That's funny. Just pull it shut. Thanks. All right, thank you. We're ready.
Okay. Well, hello again and welcome to our October Purple Chair Chat. My name is Larissa Whitney and I'm the Education and Prevention Specialist at Janus Campaign. Our intention during this Purple Chair Chat is to center around Domestic Violence Awareness Month. By the end of this chat, you'll know more about where to access resources if you or a friend need them. Purple Chair Chats are live conversations instilling the knowledge, skills, and values necessary to prevent gender and relationship violence. We use these discussions to raise awareness, engage bystanders, promote healthy and respectful relationships, and to encourage the development of new social norms. Before we get started, we want to make sure this is a space where we all feel safe, respected, and comfortable participating. A disclaimer that we will be discussing some sensitive topics regarding gender and relationship violence, and it may be activating, so please do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. If you need resources or services and you do not know who your local advocates are, reach out to us and we will do our best to put you in contact with the right people. We will link in the chat resources for youth and adults that help provide education and safe spaces. So in some of our previous Purple Chair chats, I have mentioned information from our content that we're sharing today that we want to give credit to is from the Family Peace Initiative. So today I'm thrilled to introduce you to Dorothy Stuckey-Halley, as well as Steve. He's joining us as well. They are the directors of the Family Peace Initiative program. Christy and Kurt first met Dorothy a couple of months after Jana's passing, following a recommendation to connect with her in Topeka. During their meeting, Dorothy not only assisted them in finding a grief counselor, but also played a key role in providing information about the field of domestic violence to Kurt and Christy. They frequently sought Dorothy's expertise whenever they had questions on the topic. Dorothy Stuckey-Halley, co-founder of Halley Counseling Services, is an international trainer with a focus on trauma-informed battering intervention. She served as the director of the Victim Services Division of the Kansas Attorney General's Office from 2007 to 2020, where she established the Human Trafficking Advisory Board and developed an evidence-informed motivation typology for batterers, enhancing understanding among various stakeholders in the domestic violence field. Dorothy has worked with victims since 1986, including over a decade as executive director of Safe House, and has held academic positions at Pittsburgh State University. She's been an expert witness in domestic violence cases for 33 years and has led efforts to certify battering intervention programs in Kansas. Recognized with multiple awards, including the Outstanding Victim Advocate of the Year and the Dorothy Halley Lifetime Service Award, Dorothy is also a published author. Along with her husband, Steve, Dorothy has co-authored curricula for working with batterers, justice-involved individuals, and diverse populations. They also wrote what we're going to discuss further today, The River of Cruelty and Halley's Alley, which explore themes of marriage, parenting, family, healthy relationships, loss, grief, trauma, and domestic violence. Dorothy's presented to over 30,000 professionals globally and serves on the board of directors, for the International Public Policy Institute, representing the organization at the United Nations Commission for the Status of Women. Wow, it's an honor. And I feel like I could chat with both of you all day, but since we only have a short amount of time, like I mentioned earlier, our focus is on the river of cruelty. So I'd love to turn it over to you, Dorothy, and thank you so much, Steve, for helping out as well. Without further ado.
Well, thank you so much, Larissa. I have to say, my voice is kind of shaky today because I'm coming off of a cold. And so I said, Steve, would you um, consider helping out as well so that Larissa isn't dealing with somebody answering and no vocal happening? So I'm grateful that Steve is here, but he also deserves to be here for another reason. In all actuality, while I was at the Office of the Attorney General doing work on getting certified programs across the state and making certain that victim services were adequately represented in Kansas and funding was happening for victim service agencies, Steve was really focused on how can we do trauma focused services for those who batter. And one of the things that evolved out of our work as we looked at the need to be trauma focused was really taking an understanding of those who cause harm. When I started in the very early 90s, providing some services to those who cause harm, I had already spent some time running a domestic violence shelter working with the victims, and I was all about accountability. I wanted them to be held accountable when they walked into the group room. But unfortunately, what I found was that it takes more than accountability to get people to make transformational change. In the meantime, while I was starting there, Steve was working with youth in Florida and learning about here's some troubled youth who have done some violence and what do we need to do in order to get to them. So together, as we developed our programming, we recognized that there was a real need for engagement and for understanding. You know, when it comes to Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey's book, they talk about what happened to you, and that is such a critical piece if we're going to work with someone and be effective. I was so glad when they came out with that book. I felt like Steve and I for like 20 years have been looking at what happened to you when it comes to those who cause harm. And one of the things that we've realized is that there's something that happens to people before they cause harm. And helping them understand that takes some of the focus off of the victim and what she said that night, and helps them understand that those triggers were installed long before they even met her. And we started really wanting to show how when it comes to abusive behavior, those things are transferred from person to person and generation to generation. Steve, you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. We have been seeing a pretty high level of trauma in our group rooms long, in the early days of working together. And we started adding components that were kind of trauma focused components to our more of accountability based approaches in the early years. And then we read the work of Alice Miller, and she was a prolific writer, but she wrote one book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, that really laid out the transmission of cruelty through the generations and from person to person. And that really set us on a mission because that just resonated with us, with those that we were working with those who were battering. And as we really focused on it and dug into it, it was really, I don't think we found anybody who couldn't identify cruelty that they experienced long before they were cruel to anybody. And the definitions that we use for cruelty are two of them that really apply to this. And I think it's important for everybody to understand. We kind of throw the word cruelty around, but what are we talking about? And the first definition is just the intentional infliction of pain and suffering, right? To hurt somebody on purpose, right? To create pain or suffering on purpose. It's the difference between me accidentally stepping on Dorothy's toe and saying, oh my gosh, excuse me, I need to watch where I'm going, versus me stomping on her toe and then watching her as she hops around and goes, my gosh, why did you do that? The intentionality is a huge um, consideration. But the second definition literally changed my life. It probably changed, Dorothy and my relationship forever, when Alice Miller talked about the blatant disregard of another person. All right, when I make decisions, Larissa, that might impact you, but I don't take your interest into account. I don't take into account what's good for you, what you want, what your dreams are. I just do it because I want to do what I want to do. Anytime I make a decision that affects somebody and I don't consider their interests, that is an act of cruelty. And when we started looking at that and applying all of that to the world of domestic violence, it really changed things for us, because we've all done that, right? We have all, maybe not everybody has intentionally inflicted pain and suffering, but it's not a reach to see examples of the ways we blatantly disregard somebody who's impacted by our decisions and we don't take them into account. And the last thing I would add to that is that John Gottman, the great marriage therapist, counselor, researcher out in Washington, he talks about he wrote the book, The Science of Trust. And in it, he wrote the definition of trust, which is the knowledge that one's interests will be considered. And we read that like, there it is. That's the antithesis, right? That's the antidote for cruelty. Instead of blatantly disregarding people, that people can trust that their interests will be considered when decisions are made. And that's fair on a relationship level. That's fair on a national policy level. That's fair on a worldwide level between countries. How do we take each other's interests into account?
So in looking at that, Larissa, what we started looking at are the steps that lead to this. And I want to show the River of Cruelty map and have Steve kind of talk us through it.
You're having me talk us through it?
That's right, because my voice is going.
So,
can everybody see that?
We can, yes.
I still remember the day. Janae Kent doesn't get nearly enough credit for being involved in this kind of developing of this concept, because we had been reading Alice Miller and thinking about cruelty, and that was a big shift for us to move away from talking about domestic violence as intimate partner violence or whatever the words were, and just really framing domestic violence and family violence as cruelty. These are acts of cruelty. These are acts of intentional infliction of pain and suffering and acts of blatant disregard. And Alice Miller really educated us on people who use cruelty as adults were almost always treated cruelly first. In fact, I haven't found a situation where that's not true, but I'm confident there's probably a situation out there. And so in our classes, what we do is we start building a list with the first box, because Alice Miller says we're born perfect. And when she says that, she's talking about our ability to express ourselves. Right? When we're hungry, we can cry. When we're cold, we can cry. When we're tired, we can cry. When we're not feeling well, we can cry. When we need to have our diapers changed, we can cry. And we don't care who's around us. We don't care if it's in our living room or in the middle of a church congregation on Sundays. When we have a need, we let the world know, because there's no other way for us to survive. We have to be able to communicate our needs, and the way we are born to do that is through our crying, through our expressing what we're feeling. And then Alice Miller says the problem starts to happen when we experience cruel events. And this list of potential cruelties is long, 45 or 50, items, including, all the ACEs, groups, the physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, having, criminal thinking in the family, suicide and mental health issues inside of the family, witnessing domestic violence. Those are just the beginnings of the forms of cruelty that are neglect, the high expectations, the low expectations, the favoritism amongst siblings, the violence and abuse among siblings to each other that doesn't get included many times in the ACEs questionnaire. The list of cruelties is enormous. And what we do, Dorothy, you look like you're about to say something. You want to
Oh,
add?
I just think for limited time, if you could just kind of go through each one of those very quickly, it would probably help because I think we're on limited time here.
Okay. What are we supposed to end at 3 o'clock this afternoon? What time are we supposed to be done? So, but the list of cruelties is enormous, and the impact of those cruelties is significant to people. And so what we do is we build this list, and then we ask people to identify which of the list have they experienced. But then the second box, we move into that, and that's the adverse feelings. The adverse feelings, every time that we experience cruelty, we feel something in our bodies. That's not weird, right? We feel weak, we feel sad, we feel afraid, we feel angry, we feel worthless, we feel helpless, we feel dirty, whatever the feelings are. We have these feelings, and they're always feelings that are undesirable, right? They're not the feelings that we hope to feel in the morning. Adverse feelings are the feelings that when we woke up this morning, you probably didn't want to feel these things today, and you probably had a plan for how to not feel these things, and a plan for if the feelings did come up, what are you going to do to manage them? What are you going to do to hide them? What are you going to do to get away from them? Because we've learned that these feelings are not pleasant. And if people see us having these feelings, something bad could happen to us, right? We could be taken advantage of. We could be ridiculed. We could be seen as weak or inferior. There's all kinds of reasons that we have for hiding and avoiding these feelings.
And the
It's-
feelings then lead to defense systems. And there is a whole list of defense systems that different individuals tend to opt for. Some to hide that feel or cope with the feelings of whatever adverse feeling that they are having. Their way of coping might be to use drugs and alcohol, or to be promiscuous, or to work 20 hours a day. So we all resort to defense systems, and each of those defense systems create unintended consequences. For example, when someone is drinking, they don't really expect to ever get a DUI. They were just trying to numb the pain. With all of that, it ends up with different beliefs and attitudes that we gain about ourselves and others. And with all of that, one of the defense systems often is aggression. And that's what we see in many of those who batter. Once they understand this progression, then they can start understanding that it's not all about their victim, that these things were inherent in them long before they met their victim.
Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell, Larissa.
Yeah, I so appreciate you sharing the map because it is the perfect visual to go along with what you've been saying. I've learned a lot. Once again, it's an honor, and thank you so much for sharing just a little. I know you could share a lot more, but sharing just a little piece, including the map. And I know that we'll be sharing a little bit more in the comments on this Facebook Live. If you go to the comments, we'll add links to specifically the River of Cruelty. And I believe you said it was on YouTube. You had a blog as
Mhm.
well.
Yes.
If they'd like to learn more, perfect.
If they'd like to learn more, they are welcome to. Steve has a lot of blogs, and some of them are specific to the River of Cruelty
Mhm.
and how all of us really are in that river to some extent.
Yeah, the YouTube channel is Family Peace Initiative.
Okay.
The YouTube channel, and people can find us there.
Excellent. Well, National Domestic Violence Awareness Month is observed in October, and it sheds light on domestic violence victims, and it aims to raise awareness. We hope that our audience will join us at Jana's campaign's annual event, Empty Place at the Table, on October 19th as we commemorate 15 years of violence prevention in honor and in memory of Jana. Thank you, Dorothy and Steve, for attending many Empty Place at the Table events and for all the work that you've done in prevention as well.
Mhm.
Thank you for joining us. This is for our audience and for the Hallies. For this month's Purple Chair Chat, I know I was able to learn something today. I hope our audience is able to take some of what they've learned, and we appreciate you both sharing your expertise. And then, as always, if you are in need of resources or services and you don't know who your local advocates are, reach out to us and we'll do our best to put you in contact with the right people. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Larissa.
Absolutely. It was an honor.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.